In our next panel, we're going to shift gears a bit and talk to two large companies who have pivoted their manufacturing and supply chain capabilities during the COVID pandemic. Joining us today are Elena Marziano, Chief Purchasing Officer for Procter & Gamble, and Rob Vislosky, Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer of Honeywell. Elena has held numerous supply management positions with P&G over her 32-year career. She joined the company in 1988 when she began working with the fabric and home care division in her native Caracas, Venezuela. Rob joined Honeywell in 2018 as Chief Procurement Officer and has held CPO roles at XPO Logistics, Valspar Corporations, and Reynolds Packaging Group. Thanks to both of you for being here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and start with Elena, and Rob will be back with you in just a minute. Hi, Elena. How are you today?
How are you, Nicole? Good.
Great. So before the latest crisis, P&G had a significant citizenship initiative that you referred to as the Force for Good. It appears that P&G was able to stay really true to that initiative through the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, you said it right. We have a very strong citizenship program that was very well established. And the whole pandemic pushed us to have it with an even more clear focus on being a force for good and force for growth. So as we, went through the whole situation and clearly identified based on the experience in China that started before us, we shift and we frame our force for good and force for growth strategy around three main topics. The first one is to be protecting our P&G people. The second to be serving our community or consumers, and the last one supporting our communities. On the protecting our people, again, based on the experience in China, we clearly realized that we needed to do something to protect the people that were making, packing, and shipping every day. So we started producing masks for our people at the sites, and then clearly evolved into we will need to do more than just the sites, and we will need to start producing for our entire China-based organization. So as the pandemic, started expanding around the world, then we reapplied the learnings in China and started to think about production and expanding this production around the world. We are about 20 plus lines now running globally and making masks for, again, all of our people at the sites, plus our office employees around the world. That is one example. We also went into hand sanitizers and a few other things. And the hand sanitizer then was backed up by our Safeguard brand and some of the products that were making a lot of fit with our overall lineup. In serving consumers, our products were classified early on as essentials, and we saw a huge spike in our demand. That again, going back to our roles here, we were able to support thanks to our ecosystem of suppliers and the immense response and the relationships we had with them. On the brand side, for instance, just to give you an example, we were also quickly getting into encouraging consumers through media and advertising to respect and follow social distancing. We also had a great response from our media suppliers, helping us with this communication and campaign. And then the last one on supporting our communities, we donated an immense amount of products around the world. We created a Force for Good council just to organize the donations we were doing, having the right approvals, the right stewardship. That is on the product and finished product side to communities, but we also then joined hospitals and local communities and NGOs to help with PPEs and donations on that area to help, again, communities to be able to operate where we have our sites and our offices.
Thank you. So you mentioned making the masks and bringing on all those new lines. So I'm sure you had to have a lot of partnerships with your suppliers for that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you look at your suppliers as part of your ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I said it before, right? The suppliers are an integral part of our ecosystem, and I can say without any doubt that we were able to stay true to our force for good and force for growth because of our supply base. We stayed operational through the entire crisis, and the vast majority of our suppliers were also operational with us. So again, they are integral part of our supply base. We were able to expand, for instance, and extend to them all of our protocols of cleaning, temperature, how to maintain and make sure their employees were as protected as our own employees. We extended letters to ensure that their people were considered to be essential workers for a supply base and a supply chain that was supporting and ultimately our productions as essential, as we were classified as essential. So again, they were key, they were part of our ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, a really close ecosystem. And as you can imagine, the situation is global. We have a very strong global footprint, and that ecosystem looked a little bit different depending on the regions, depending on the sites, depending on government regulations. Some limitations we had on mobilizing people, but we did the impossible to keep them really, really close to us, to keep them as essential as we are, and to partner with them in the way that they were really feeling part of our ecosystem.
Thanks. So the suppliers really helped you with understanding what was happening in each of the local governments and everything as well.
Yeah,
correct?
absolutely. Absolutely. You know, again, regulations are very, very different. And what works, we realized that very clearly in starting in North America, where we were seeing regulations and lockdowns that started in one state and then moved to the other one. And then clearly realized, you know, we need to give all of our suppliers, enable them to have the essential classification, because this is going to happen nationwide, you know. And then you go to a completely different country where the regulations are managed in a very different way. So we needed to have a very strong partnership with our government relations organization, partnering with them, working with government, working with our suppliers, not to do their job. They were lobbying themselves, but we were guiding, because we have presence in these countries, and we were guiding them to, you know, have the conversations and justifying why they needed to stay operational through the pandemic, and how we were going to ensure the safety of their employees. And that's where we helped them tremendously.
Perfect. So everything that you that's happened and changed during this pandemic, is there anything that you learned during this crisis that you plan to take and apply and use in the future?
Oh my God, we learned a lot of things, right? Listen, at a very high level, I would start saying that we learned that we can definitely be more agile, more faster, and be overall much more productive. Okay. But if I, you know, go to the next level, then we also learned that we needed to work on few other things moving forward. And I'll give you an example. Labor became a constraint for our manufacturing sites. And specifically in some geographies where we are highly dependent on contracted labor to operate our sites, those became a problem because people were not able to mobilize because they had lockdowns between cities and they were not able to move. We facilitated living places, we facilitated transportation, but still that became one of the biggest constraints. So one of the key follow-ups we are working on as part of the internalization of the whole crisis is we definitely need to work on more transformative and manufacturing equipment and automation that help us reducing our dependency on labor. And this is going to look, the other key insight is the solution is going to look very different, because the solution that works in China at China cost may not work in Saudi, may not work in India. And that solution is very different than if you go to Europe or North America. So we will need to work on a tiering of solutions for reducing labor, but that's one of the key buckets of our learnings. The other one is we learned that we can be, again, by far more faster and agile in the way we qualify our raw materials and packing materials. So we are working on a whole effort to say how we stay true to COVID speed as we move forward and we adapt. Some of the key learnings we had through the process to make them to be the norm. We're also implementing remote qualifications and visuals that allow us to start up machines, to start up new suppliers, to start up a new material with remote sourcing and remote support instead of flying, our who knows how many resources to those sites. How we do it remotely, that's another big learning. So we have a whole list. Those are the general ones. I'm telling you, there are specificity by materials, by type of business, by region. But in a highlight, again, I would say this gave us a huge opportunity to learn. We can be faster and more agile, and we have a huge opportunity ahead of us.
Okay. So we do have a question from the audience for you. There's so much discussion around changing supply chains. Do you foresee that your supply chain looks significantly different in 2 to 5 years, or do you see that being stable?
Yeah, if you talk about our footprint and the way we source, our footprint will probably remain the same. What I think we will definitely change or reevaluate is global versus local. With all, the pressure existing on long supply chains, the ability of being resilient and responding to events like this one, the ability of the responsiveness, number one, but the second one is all of the constraints that we can anticipate related to tariff, international shipments, that will make us pause and think differently about the design of and the flow of our materials and finished products, and be more resilient in a local basis, but at least at a minimum to have a very clear business continuity plans that allow us to react to that in a faster way. So I think it's going to look different from that point of view, and it's going to look definitely more local versus global.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Ana Elena. We really appreciate you being here to share this information with us today. We're going to go ahead and bring Rob up.
Hi, Nicole.
Thanks for being with us today.
No, my pleasure.
So we're often looking very closely at our supply chains, especially during the pandemic when they're really under a microscope. But it's always our desire to create agile and adaptable supply networks. Can you tell us what that looks like for you at Honeywell?
Yeah, there's a great example. If any of you've watched the press on Honeywell over the last month, you've seen our capability in taking what is not just a great industrial and technology company, but also a company focused on the world health. In this particular case, we established 2 lines to make N95 masks in 5 weeks. And why is it important to be agile and connected to your supply base? In real terms, that would be effectively like doing it in 2 weeks in a situation where you do not have a COVID crisis in place. Here's why. The suppliers that we dealt with, number one, had a tough time getting a hold of employees, finding employees who could go to locations. Secondly, just the basics of the employees would be doing the work on our sites, having housing within hotels, extreme limitations in both parts of the country on establishing a footprint that would allow these workers to stay there. And we had to work directly with our supply partners not just on the travel management side, but also on the hotel network side. So again, if you think about establishing N95 masks, who would have thought that would have been an important aspect? Third is delivery of electronic parts. I think Elena mentioned the importance of understanding your supply base globally. You look at the equipment that we utilize to make N95 masks, there's a series of electronic components. If you recall the start of the crisis, it began in China and then landed in Singapore and Malaysia. That's where a substantial portion of these electronic parts were manufactured, sensors specifically for the machines that we put in place in North America to create these N95 masks. We had to go through the entire chain of our supply base, not just second, third, but fifth level suppliers to ensure that they were able to deliver at the time frame we needed. So if you think about flexible, connected, and also dynamic supply chains, all three of those aspects presented themselves as challenges that we were able to meet because we had that strong supplier connectivity, and as well systems that allow us to see those issues in advance and get the lines up and running in time.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. You started a very successful supply chain financing program at Honeywell a few years ago. Did you find that you accelerated that program during the recent pandemic?
Absolutely. You've heard the old expression, it's better to be lucky than good. I feel very fortunate that in 2018, when I started, we created a partnership with one of our major banks that holds an enormous amount of debt with Honeywell and established a formalized supply chain financing program. Why is that a benefit? With the cost of cash being what it is, so low, and in the current financial crisis that's post-COVID-19, these suppliers need some support. That supply chain financing program has been instrumental in helping our suppliers maintain good lines of credit with Honeywell, getting paid on time, at the same time allowing Honeywell to maintain a positive working capital position. You mentioned earlier on, Nicole, that certain individuals might be approached with dialing back payment terms. Recognizing that may be a necessity in certain cases, the advent of implementing this supply chain financing program allowed us to avoid that in many cases. So it's been a benefit not only for Honeywell, but also the suppliers. Not often do you find a win-win. In this particular case, it absolutely was.
Great. I want to circle back a little bit to the story you were telling in the beginning with manufacturing the N95 masks here in Phoenix. We heard a lot about it on the news here because it's local to us.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it took for your supply management team to quickly pivot into managing that?
Absolutely. First and foremost, the blessing you have working with Honeywell, we have a strong technology group. And I use that term broadly because it's not just technology for aerospace design, which is heavy within, of course, the Phoenix and Arizona areas, but technology overall. The technology prowess we have within this group is fantastic. Not only are they have the capabilities to make aerospace parts well, but again, pivot to manufacturing to make N95 masks and also respirators. Amazing set of steps required to find, number one, the space, the technology providers external to Honeywell, and also establish a manufacturing footprint. It's not just putting the machines in, but it's getting the people in place. And if you look at the videos that were online around our frontline employees that actually help get the line up and running, apply best-in-class manufacturing practices, not only were we online on time, but online efficiently with a very low cost of poor quality, inefficient output, as well as delivery times we're meeting our customers' end state. So if you will, the coolness factor of Honeywell has been applied here because first and foremost, it's technology. How effectively is your technology capabilities flexible to pivot from manufacturing aerospace parts to making N95 masks? Right behind that, how tight is your supply chain network to your supply base to start those supply chains up effectively? And third, how well connected are you to the existing employees and new employees you need to bring on board? It's without that triumvirate that we would not have had this success. And it's been, like I said, a coolness factor of working within the Honeywell network.
Mm-hmm. I like that you mentioned the coolness factor. And you also mentioned the employees. So how important was employee engagement in all of this for you?
Think about the timing that you normally work. I mean, everybody espouses how much they put into their job. But when it comes to getting these supply chain networks up and running, number one, work from home added a complexity to it initially, but ultimately added an efficiency. So let's talk about employees in our IT network. Extremely strong set of individuals allowing our networks to run efficiently, running with limited downtime. In addition to that, having the physical tools, the laptops, the machines, the headsets to actually conduct your engagement with your supply base. So if you look at that, and without being able to dynamically engage your supply base, it would be impossible to understand the delivery timeframes. Two, on the employee side, the amount of effort and time they put into these roles over the last 3.5 months has been amazing. You can track how long people are online with what jobs they're doing, as well as the extensive meetings happening literally 24/7. We were having meetings with their suppliers, starting these N95 masks up Saturdays and Sundays with senior level people within the supply base, also within the company. Why is it important to have employees willing to put that dedication in? We are looking to keep our ship afloat, and in addition to that, save lives. So employee dedication, commitment to Honeywell, the 9 behaviors, as we put it, were alive and well within the organization. Final point on that, Nicole, is how this is, I call it maybe a good play on words, contagious with our supply base, because the energy Honeywell employees had towards getting the lines up and running was without a doubt transcending in the supply base. So it really helped us when this supplier saw the time, the efforts Honeywell's putting into this. They were able to place a new focus on delivery. Many times you run into suppliers that anticipate that the delivery times they've done in the past are good. We needed much better than good. And they met that challenge, and they did that, I believe, in large part because they espoused to be very much like the Honeywell employees on their behaviors, to execute and not take okay or good as acceptable. We needed best in class.
Perfect. So we do have a couple questions from the audience that I'm going to ask you. Do you use a formal methodology to assess supplier country risk?
We do. We have a tool that was built very similar to what Elena might have mentioned on supplier risk, as opposed to an off-the-shelf tool that's customized to our needs. It does 3 things for us, which is important for anybody managing a complex supply base. Our supply base, like many of yours, is measured in thousands. So understanding, what physical location they're at. Are they based out of China? And what are the situation regarding Chinese access to raw materials? Are they based in North America? Are they based in Mexico? Having a good understanding of where they're physically located, utilizing this tool was critical to our success. The rules in each of these countries were much different on startup related to COVID-19 as well. So taking that tool and applying a risk ranking as to what suppliers are considered critical, to which parts we're making. And finally, we use the same tool to tie us into an understanding of revenue and margin hit. It definitely helped us to dimensionalize the problem down to the core group of suppliers we needed to work with, and also develop an action plan to help them resolve any issues they might have on getting parts themselves, getting employees in the door, and meeting our delivery requirements.
Thank you. And back to supply chain financing. Do you have challenges implementing supply chain financing in different countries?
That was an old challenge Honeywell had. The new program we have is global in nature. So really, beyond the tactical aspects of establishing the program, the answer is no. Whether it's Singapore, France, Mexico, the U.S., really not had any significant problems other than establishing the program, getting the communication out. Again, like others on this call had mentioned around the quarterly business review process, we also have a supplier summit process, of which is now going to be virtual. Over the last 2.5 years, we've used that summit process, Nicole, to communicate how the supply chain financing program would work. We don't actively market it. It's a third party, it's a bank, but we provide that as an option for our suppliers to utilize. It's not a connection point to Honeywell. It's an optionality. And as I mentioned, it is truly a win-win for the suppliers if it works for them.
Mm-hmm. And then one last question, same that I asked of Elena. What does your supply chain look like in 2 to 5 years? And what may be the drivers of any change that you see?
First of all, 100% digital, and we're close to that in many areas, but not all areas. 2, my expression, I call it frictionless procurement. Although in negotiations, we tend to have some friction when we are placing an order, executing to an MRP, delivering raw materials to make finished goods. We want that absolutely to be frictionless and touchless. And 3, I call it an exciting employee base. Many times within the procurement, there are aspects of it that are highly tactical and highly mundane. We're changing that. We're making this, again, I use the expression, a cool place to work, where people can establish an outstanding career and use that to leverage to grow within Honeywell or grow within their career outside of Honeywell in the supply chain or other business aspects. It's a cool place to be as well because we have strong supply chain leadership with Torsten Pilz, who's established a vision for these exact same things. And if you look within the procurement functionality, we've drafted right off that activity, and it's been an exciting journey so far, and we're excited to where this is going to land, and more closer to the 2-year time frame than the 5-year time frame.
Perfect. I'm sure your team really enjoys having such a cool place to work.
It's fun. It really is fun.
All right. Well, we are out of time for this panel. I do want to thank both Rob and Elena for joining us and being here today. I really enjoyed hearing both of your stories, and it was great to see what each of your large companies are really doing for both your employees and for the community at large in such a trying time. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, Nicole. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.